Hey guys, welcome to the Neglected Podcast. This podcast is not to change your mind, but to invite you into somebody else's narrative. This is a podcast to give a voice to the neglected. It is also an opportunity for all of us to engage.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Neglected Podcast. My name is Nick Schultz. You can check me out, Schultz Time. And I have a very special guest today and a special producer. Got Isaac over there producing because our guest today is producer Quinn. What's going on, Quinn? How you doing?
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. What's going on?
Not much. This is kind of a unique opportunity here because you and I talk off camera, and now you're the one on it. But we always wanted to interview you because you got a pretty incredible story I think that people need to hear. And before we get started, tell people maybe how we got connected in the first place and why you even wanted to be a part of this podcast that was just an idea.
Yeah, for sure. So I have spent a really long time listening to podcasts. I was listening to some stuff whenever podcasting first became a thing. I was probably somewhere between like 12 or 13 to maybe 15 or 16. I can't really remember exactly when it was, but I would listen to a lot of gaming stuff and I just really enjoyed it. I couldn't get enough of it. And I went to college for live production, light, sound, that kind of stuff. And just as I've gotten older, it just got harder for me to keep up with equipment trends and stuff like that. And I was already listening to tons and tons of podcasts. I was working a job outside of the production, field. Yeah. And one day I was just like, man, I could just kind of do my own thing. I'll just buy my own equipment and I'm already listening to them constantly. So, why not? And then, I got hired on here and Jim came up to me one day, said that he ran into you and just kind of connected us and that was it.
Yeah, it was a crazy thing because this whole idea of the podcast was just like, I never wanted to do it. I wasn't looking to do it. And then you talk to the right people or like, oh, we have the equipment at this building. You should talk to this guy, Quinn, who's started working for us and he's interested in doing all this and he'd probably do it with you. I'm like, what? All I have is an idea and I'm not even trying to do it. And now you're telling me that this could actually happen. And it all just happened so fast. Met you, came over here, showed me everything in the room. I'm like, this is insane that we even have this somewhere. And you at least enjoyed the idea enough where you were like, hey, I'll be a part of it. I'll help produce it. And people give huge compliments about how it's produced. And that's all you, man. Yeah. You do a really great job. And none of this would happen if you weren't willing to be a part of it. And you didn't have to do it. That's the other thing. It's like your boss isn't forcing you to do it. No one's forcing you to do it. And just kind of what was it about kind of what we were looking at doing? Why did that resonate with you to be a part of something like it?
So the majority of the stuff that I listen to is, I listen to what people call some of the intellectual dark web, people like Joe Rogan and stuff. And I just really love learning stuff. And so there are a lot of different lanes that you could go down. People do comedy stuff. You can do it on sports. You can, but the idea that you had was to do something around diversity and the issues that our culture has with racism and all that, and that's something that kind of struck a chord with me. Like, here's somebody that wants to sit down and have these conversations about stuff that the entire world is for the most part scared to have the conversation at all, and you're wanting to have it and put it out on the internet. And it was something that I just immediately got on board with because I love stuff like that. First off, I'm a rebellious kind of guy, so let's put some uncomfortable stuff on the internet, but also, I follow politics and all that. And, I was really just interested in getting in here and listening to people's stories and how, issues that they can't even control, not issues, but circumstances they can't control, so much affect their lives and, the way that they're just shaped and all that. So.
I hear you, man. And we appreciate you doing it because, said again, can't say it enough. Like, if you weren't a part of this, it wouldn't be happening. Yeah. So let's dive into, kind of what made Quinn Harris who he is and some of the stuff you've struggled with and been neglected with and why it resonates with you. Give us a little quick background on how you grew up, where you were, family dynamic, and neighborhood, whatever that
sure.
kind of picture is for us.
So I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We got 2 great parents, 2 younger brothers. My dad's in the medical field. He runs his own kind of contract work, anesthesia firm type deal. My mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. Our whole lives, whenever all of us kind of got to the age to where they were, the youngest was in college, she got a job at a local elementary school just to, kind of keep something to do. But grew up Catholic. It was a good, upbringing. Nothing traumatic really happened. I think that for me, one of the things that really changed my perspective on everything in life was, I guess, the first time, we had to, as Catholics in the South, we had to do catechism and confirmation and all this stuff. And so all my friends were kind of based around the community and the Catholic culture, more or less. But, I can remember meeting a kid, his name's Ethan, and in middle school, and we were like getting off the bus or whatever. He was getting off the bus. I was like, yeah, man, I'll see you tonight at church for catechism. And he was like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, at church, for CCD. And he was like, my family doesn't go to church. And it just blew my mind that like people have the option to not go to church. And from there, I guess I started kind of the idea got planted in my head that potentially maybe I would not have the opportunity to become who I really wanted to be in that area. And as I was a teenager, started using some drugs and stuff like that, pot, that type of deal. And that eventually escalated into eating a pill here or there. And then I went through normal teenage stuff, first breakup with my first girlfriend kind of thing. And then I got my wisdom teeth taken out, and it was just a snowball of events that put a prescription of pills in my hands, and it just kind of took off from there.
Okay. So why do you think that was, I don't know if appealing is the right word, but what was it about the drugs or the pills that what it was doing to you kind of psychologically? Was it calming you down? Was it just the rush of it? Why do you think you kind of started going down that path of enjoying that?
I think, like I said, growing up in that area, there's really not that many options there's not many occupations, many fields really to go into. Most of it is plant work. So a lot of people, they work the job that their dad worked, that their grandpa worked at a chemical plant or whatever. And that's great. Or a lot of people work on the river. My best friend, he works on tugboats and stuff. His whole family does. They've done it forever. They love it. They make a ton of money. Or like an architect, doctor, lawyer, that type of deal. And none of that stuff fit into my thing. And so I think there was an underlying confusion within myself as to who I was and who I was supposed to be and all that. And I think that those few events kind of brought out that stuff, and I was using, drugs to cope with it, basically. I just didn't understand the feeling. And
okay, so drugs for you are more of a coping thing as opposed to a rebellious trying to just get a rush out of something?
Yeah, I mean, I learned that, much later.
Okay, so where did all that stuff take you? Give us a little bit of a timeline of you started when I guess you were a teenager or...
Yeah, probably like 16, 17, started smoking pot. Probably 17, I take a Xanax here or there. 17 was also whenever that breakup was. I don't know if it was around the same time. I went to the doctor first for depression meds.
And was it, did you initiate that, or were your parents seeing something, or like what was that like?
It was probably my parents, more than likely.
And did you think you were depressed, or were they just saying you're very different and we need to figure it out?
I can't remember, man.
Yeah.
I really can't. Like
Did you ever think you were when you were that age? Like you might have a problem?
No, I think that at the time, what I thought that I was dealing with was just heartbreak, basically. But so probably around the same time, I would have been the breakup, start smoking pot, eating a little pills here or there, and then also getting put on the depression meds, which I don't really care for those now. And to be honest with you, I don't know if they did anything back then. But moving past that, probably I got into using OxyContin pretty heavily, selling a little bit of it, hanging out with a rougher crew. Eventually I started using it intravenously, and I was using a lot of it all the time. Mm-hmm. And those pills were worth a fortune at the time. They were about...
Yeah, what year was that?
That would have been either, I'd say like 2009, maybe 2010.
Okay.
They were about roughly $1 a milligram, maybe 70 cents per milligram. So if you were buying a 30 milligram one, you were usually paying $25. If you were buying an 80 milligram one, 60 if you were real lucky.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very expensive habit. The only way that I really kept it was I was hanging out with a girl that was selling them, and a lot of them, and I would sell a few of them here or there, and it would just kind of keep up the...
So you were working with her. Were you ever part of like a bigger organization of somebody like filtering everything to you, or is it more just kind of doing it on an individual basis?
So, I mean, we dealt with people on an individual basis. The guy at the time that we were getting them from dealt with a lot of different people. I don't honestly know where he was getting them from. He always had a ton of them.
You didn't ask?
No, didn't ask. And we were regular enough customers to where, if we needed 10 or 15 of them to sell for the day and didn't have the money for them, he would front them to us. And
so where's this stuff happening? Are you in like college age 20s at this point? Are you late teenager?
Late teen,
okay.
real early 20s.
Okay. So were you going to college, or what were you doing after high school?
I was going to an IT school for computer networking.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's right. All right. So where does this stuff kind of happen? Are you going to just like upper middle class neighborhoods? Are you going to projects? Are you all over the place? Like, where are you going to get stuff and selling it? And what kind of, crowds are you around here?
So we were picking it up from the projects.
So what was the scariest or worst thing that you saw during this period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I probably the worst was seeing females that I knew personally trading themselves for OxyContin.
So it's dark, man. Dark stuff.
Yeah, it is. The guy who passed away that I was talking about, his sister, I want to say, I can't remember if she OD'd or what the deal was, but something happened. She ended up in the hospital from using or something like that, and it just hit. At the time, that was probably the closest that it hit, home to us. Somebody that we knew that. She didn't pass away, but I can't remember if like a cop found her, like knotted out in her car. It was something like that,
And did you make it through school through all this?
I did not. Whenever I signed up for that school, what I was interested in doing was computer hardware work. And the school kind of presented it like that was something that they offered and they didn't. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing a lot of networking, a lot of just internet, set up people's internet, do it at businesses. And I would have left, I think, anyway, school, just because I never had any interest in that kind of thing. I mean, as long as my internet works, I really don't care if anybody else's does. So
So what was rock bottom for you, where you hit that point and you realized you needed help, and how did that happen?
Then or later?
Well, I want to do both if possible.
Yeah. So
I want to start with then.
So back then, I was just, I had a lot of close friends from middle school that were kind of calling me out for doing it and all that. And eventually, I just got caught basically I was stealing some stuff
By police or just by other people?
by my parents,
I got you.
which they had been trying for a long time to catch me, but I was really good at hiding stuff, in plain sight. So mom would tear up my room, never find anything, and
Yep.
So yeah, I got confronted by my mom. I went to a detox there in Baton Rouge, and whenever I was done with that, I went to Hattiesburg, Mississippi to this program called Next Step, which is one of the biggest, most well-known medical inpatient rehab facilities in the country. So
did it work?
No. So I did, I think 90 days there. It was a 12-step base program.
How much does that cost? Your parents paying for all that?
Yeah, I can remember. I mean, I think that our insurance covered it, but you did have to pay up front. And I mean, I remember whenever my dad wrote the check, him saying that's the most that I've ever written a check for, ever.
How's that make you feel?
I mean, at the time, I was just mad.
Yeah.
It's a hard situation to be in. You're mad at your family for making you go. You're mad at yourself for getting in the situation. Yeah. Pretty soon after you get off of it, it's pretty clear that you were killing yourself. If you didn't know that before.
But it didn't work. You said it.
No.
Now, why didn't it work for you?
I don't know. I just don't think I was ready. I think I was too young. I was like 19, 20, something like that. And I just wasn't ready to stop.
So in the back of your mind, you're going through this knowing that I don't really want to stop. Do you think that's part of what it was? Is like,
no, I mean, I gave it a legitimate, I gave it a shot. I stayed for 90 days and then I didn't feel like I was ready. And so I actually stayed an extra 30 at that place, and then attempted to do one of their sober living things. I messed up. They called for a drug test. I called my mom and told her that there was some people smoking crack over there and I wasn't comfortable, which there was, but I had smoked pot or something like that. So I was probably going to get kicked out anyway. And so we moved me into just an apartment in Hattiesburg, and I stayed there for, I don't even know, maybe a year and a half. Lived at that apartment, lived with a guy that I went through treatment with for a while. Got into some trouble over there with some of that fake pot stuff. I was selling that stuff and got pulled over with a lot of it, and it was just a whole, it's a whole ordeal.
It's a mess,
while I was
man.
there, yeah. So,
what's it doing to you mentally or psychologically when you're going through all this? Now that you're looking back on it, at least that first kind of stint.
yeah, I mean, it's just mania, honestly. Like, it's probably the worst form of selfishness that there is, because you don't look at anyone but yourself, nobody.
And you're still going to mass or church or anything during all this, or did you just cut that all out?
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, as soon as I left Louisiana, I quit doing the Catholic thing altogether.
Okay, so you at this point you're out of Louisiana now.
Yeah, I stayed in Mississippi
Right.
after the program. So I did that for a while, moved back to Louisiana.
Are all your good friends doing the same things, into drugs and selling you, or do you have other people in your life that you're actually listening to?
So out of everyone that that I was using drugs with whenever I was a teenager, I mean, it was honestly only a couple of us that there was a few people that passed away that I wasn't really close to, but we were all, in the same circle more or less. And it was really just me and one other guy that everybody else moved on and we kind of got stuck.
I gotcha. So how'd you end up here in Savannah then?
So after that, I ended up relapsing, using OxyContin again, and then moved back to Louisiana, did a year-long Christian discipleship program there, inpatient thing. Felt led to go to Bible college. I went to Bible college in Birmingham, Alabama, relapsed on heroin.
Dang, man.
Yeah, so they, in the midst of me attempting to get sober the first time and me leaving the 1-year-long program, Purdue Pharma, which was the people making the OxyContin pills, they had to quit making them the way that they were making them, so you couldn't inject them anymore or snort them. You just kind of had to take them, and heroin just swept the streets, man.
Really? That was your first time doing it? Was then?
It was cheaper. It was better. In my opinion, people can get mad, if they want, but I think that them stopping using the formula they were doing for OxyContin is a good percentage of the reason that we're in this opiate epidemic that we are today. I'd never seen heroin.
So it filled the void that was left behind.
I mean, the difference is with that stuff is if you're buying a 30 milligram OxyContin, it's 30 milligrams. If you're buying a bag of heroin one day, it could not really do anything. Go to a guy on the other block and, they're dead. It's, you don't know what you're getting. And now you have all that stuff laced with fentanyl and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. OxyContin was bad. A lot of people were addicted to it. It reached every social economic class there is. But heroin, I mean, it just took over after that.
So how did it take over you then?
Yeah, I mean, I was using it while I was in school. In Bible college. Yeah.
You were just
producing big services high. I was dating this girl. We had a really good relationship, and I'd actually been sober for a while. And one day I was at a gas station, and a guy walked up to me and, asked me if I wanted to buy some H, and I was like, no, I don't have any interest in that. What, my mouth is watering all the meanwhile.
You could probably tell.
And finally he was like, look, how about this? How about I give you this bag for free, and I'll give you my phone number, and if you ever want some more, just hit me up.
Oh, geez.
And that was it, man.
So, Southern theological schools, Bible seminaries, all that, they're pretty conservative with a lot of rules, man.
Yeah.
Are you the only one that of doing this, or is there like an underground of people that are doing it too?
No, I mean, it was anytime that besides, that first time whenever I was hanging out with that girl with the oxys, I was basically on my own.
And you're not trying to bring anybody else into it.
No.
It's like your thing.
Yeah, my girlfriend at the time had no clue. She didn't find out until the day that I was confronted by the school, and they wanted me to go to the Los Angeles Dream Center.
All the way out there, wow.
And so I went out there, and
who's paying for that?
Us, my family.
Yeah, wow.
Went out there and left after 4 or 5 days. The Los Angeles Dream Center, I'm sure, has done amazing things for a lot of people, but where you're at the beginning, it was a room maybe 3 times the size of this with 30 something bunk beds in it. People are getting high, everybody's running around, people are fighting. Like, it was not at all an environment to attempt to get clean in. So I left. I trekked back to Louisiana with no money, no food, nothing. It was over a 48-hour trip through Greyhound. And whenever I got back, I ended up going to a program I went back to Birmingham and went to a different program over there. Didn't tell the school that, I was going to it.
Did they kick you out? Were you like suspended?
I had to finish the Dream Center to be able to graduate.
Yeah.
So
you haven't graduated yet?
I did.
Okay.
They ended up letting me after I finished that other program.
Okay, good.
While I was there, I had a good friend named Iman who he overdosed and died as well. He somehow or another came across a few prescriptions of like morphine or something like that. and he ended up getting caught while we were in the place, giving it to some other residents. And so he hid it and told me where it was. And so naturally, the day that I left, I took him with me. And I want to say after that 9-month program, I relapsed probably 20 minutes out the door.
Wow.
The girl that I was with at the time, she, whenever she found out, she broke up with me with the deal was that, you know, if I got sober, we could get back together, which that's not what you tell, you know, you don't do something like that, break up with somebody, a drug addict, and then expect them to, you know. So I was using for a while. Still after that, she would come around a little bit. Finally, I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I went to a detox. I was there for 4 or 5 days. I wasn't experiencing withdrawal symptoms or anything like that. And I left, and I've only touched hard drugs like that one other time since. So I essentially did it on my own, cold turkey. That, you know, heroin.
Why do you think that happened? Was there something in your head that clicked, that you saw yourself being in a situation that you wouldn't be able to recover from? Or was it just, I mean, because that's an impressive thing to do, and you can't just snap your fingers and do it. Like, what was going on?
I mean, I wanted my girlfriend back, you know.
Did it for love?
Yeah, I mean, I really did. I figured at some point, you know, I would probably end up dying. There was, you know, I was depressed throughout all this time. You can't be on hard drugs and not, you know, not suffer from mental depression or, you know, anxiety, anything like that. And yeah, I wanted her back. And, you know, there was plenty of times where I would sit there knowing, like, this is too much. You know, there's a good chance I'm not going to wake up. You know, if I do this, at one point, I was speedballing heroin and cocaine for a couple months. Jeez. And, you know, after every time I would do it, I would throw up. If I didn't throw up, that meant it wasn't good enough. So I have to go get more or do more or whatever. And it was just a mix of, I guess, a few different things. But that was the main motivation, was her. And so I did it. She was still coming around. She never asked. She always, she just kind of continued to assume that I was still using. And eventually, I just kind of realized that if I kept living that way, seeing her and her just, she had changed, you know, the way that we interacted was different. You know, either I was going to start using again, or I was probably going to end up committing suicide. And so I was just calling around close friends to kind of talk to and, you know, just vent. And one of the guys was one of the associate pastors here, his son. We went to Bible college together. He was a little bit ahead of me, so he graduated and moved back to Savannah. And he was just like, dude, he was a mutual friend of her and I. Okay. You know, he was just like, dude, you know, you could just move over here. And I was like, well, when can I do it? He's like, when do you want to do it? I was like, tomorrow. He's like, oh, okay, let me, you know, figure out, like, if you could stay with my family and stuff for a little bit. His dad and mom at the time were going through a separation, so doors were just kind of open, and I moved to Savannah.
So what year was that?
2015, I think.
Okay, so you've been here
almost
5 years, and you've been pretty clean for 5 years.
You know, whenever I first moved here, I started drinking and eating pills and stuff like that, and ended up going through Mission Teens, Savannah Mission, you know, down the road from here. Mm-hmm. Did their residential program, and then I stayed on staff as a missionary I was there for about 1.5 years total. And I've been out, I guess, 2 years now. Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool, man. This is a good segue into kind of like the last third of our time here, but would love to hear about just the daily battle, if there is one, or a weekly battle of not only, you know, just the drug addiction, if there is one, but also the mental side and the depression, and if those two kind of join forces, if they battle, if they alternate, like how do you deal with that on a daily basis? What's that struggle look like?
Yeah. So for me, I said earlier, I take a really unconventional approach to recovery. So one of the things that I don't do, I don't attend AA meetings or celebrate recovery or anything like that. One is that everybody has a different experience. Mm-hmm. And so some people don't see a younger person's experience as, how do I say this? As valid as what they went through. So in AA before, there's AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. There's NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous. NA welcomes everyone, alcoholics, whatever. If you're in a traditional Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, they expect you to identify yourself as an alcoholic and just have the realization that, if you're a drug addict and alcohol is not really your thing, if you did start consuming a bunch of alcohol all the time, that would just become your thing. And then so just call yourself on it. But there are some old people that they call them old timers, in those meetings. Yeah. They might be, some of them 80, 85 years old, 60 something years of sobriety. Rehab didn't exist whenever they were a kid, and I've had that said to me before, like, all these kids come in here and you want to get up in my Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and call yourself a drug addict. And that's not how we do it here. Mm-hmm. Like whenever I was a kid, we were alcoholics and that was it. And we didn't have rehab. We didn't have all this stuff to help us. We had to do it on our own. And so AA is their temple, because it's the thing that got them sober. Yeah. So that's number one, that I don't care for it. Number two, I have no interest in networking with a group of former drug addicts or alcoholics, whatever. So if you're in an NA meeting and you could be high while you're there and go up there and pick up a 24-hour chip, that's fine, that's their thing. But also everyone knows in the room that this person knows where to get drugs probably right now. I've seen that happen a bunch of times.
Gotcha.
Over the thing. And
so it didn't work for you.
No.
So what do you have to do now, or what did you start doing to help with that depression, that mental side, and that addiction side?
I just started. So one of the things that I did, one of the epiphanies that I had along the journey within the last few years is realizing that, it was much deeper than me just wanting to get high, and that after I was sober, the depression was still there, the anxiety was still there, and it's even gotten worse, over time sometimes. I deal now with depression a lot and very bad social anxiety. And, I can definitely say that a year ago it wasn't as bad as it is today.
And you work for a church. You do a lot of work here at the church. Like,
I mean,
what is that like when, the church is like, help people, be around people all the time. And, you're over there silently suffering a lot of times. Like, what does that do for you, man?
I mean, I've really just embraced the mentality that it's temporary. At some point I'll feel better. It's hard a lot of times, but
do you let people know that much?
Yes. I have a few people that check up on me on a weekly basis. So my best friend from back home, and also a guy that I was in the mission with. I like to use sources that aren't directly in my life on a regular basis, because it's hard to pick up on some of that stuff whenever you're doing life with somebody, day to day. And so, but what they're never checking on me for, am I using drugs? They're checking on me for, how I'm feeling, that kind of stuff. Because, I heard somebody say this, a comedian that I really like, his name's Joey Diaz. He's, dealt with hardcore coke addiction for years. And one day he said that he got himself to a spot where he found appreciation and gratitude for his drug addiction, because without having drugs as a coping mechanism, something much worse could have happened. And I think that for me, that perspective really keeps me going a lot of times just kind of all around is it's deeper than just wanting to go get a fix, you know. It just is. And if I continue to look back at my life and my past with substance abuse, it you know, there's a lot of memories that I could think about that make me feel really, really bad. You know, I could tell you 100 of the most hilarious stories that you've ever heard about people that are getting high and all that stuff, but for every one of those stories, there's 1,000 horrible ones.
Sure.
You know.
Well, this podcast is called The Neglected, obviously, and how can other people help or be in the life of someone maybe that was going through what you were going through, or even now? Like, what can we do for people that struggle with depression, whether it came from, you know, drug use or not, or people that struggle every day with a substance issue that they're battling? Like, how can people enter to their lives and just make a difference in small ways?
My opinion is the best thing that you can do is just make it known that you're someone that's available for these people to come and talk to, you know. If you see somebody that you think is depressed, I mean, I wouldn't just walk up to a random person and, hey, you're looking, you know,
you look depressed,
you look kind of down kind of thing. But, you know, for a relationship with someone like me and you know, I would approach you like, hey, I just want to check on you. It just seems like you've been a little down or a little bit more pessimistic, you know, than you are normally. Is there anything you want to talk about or anything like that? And
I have permission to ask. I mean, is there a relationship once you build it where it's like, okay, I feel comfortable with Nick if he asks me if I'm feeling a little depressed today, or he notices something, he has permission to ask me when I might not tell him?
Well, it's how you go about it. So, you know, nobody wants to feel crazy. So I would never approach somebody like, you need to be on medicine,
you need to
anything
change
like
now,
that.
yeah.
But just making it known to that person that you're someone that they can trust and someone that genuinely cares, that kind of stuff those were always the people that I ended up reaching out to, you know, is the people who put forth a little bit of effort and then
it takes time
left me alone.
It takes time for them to hear your story and understand the background and where you're coming from too, not just, hey, trust me. Well, you gotta spend a little time with me. Yeah.
You asked about the church. As far as, you know, that goes, I have found that there's not, I don't want to sound, I haven't found a scripture that I can recite over myself that makes me feel better or that makes me feel relieved or anything like that. A lot of people that suffer from, you know, clinical depression or any of that stuff, I mean, it's just something that they have to live with, you know, and there are some drugs that you can take that make it better or relieve some of the symptoms, but a lot of that stuff also rewires your brain, you know, and so for me, you know, I just remind myself that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't make me feel bad whenever we're doing outreach or anything like that, if I'm depressed. And I would say for the most part, wouldn't you, Isaac, that if I'm really depressed, I'll just say it. Yeah. I mean, that's
good. Well, not a lot of people can though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you couldn't do it back 5-10 years ago either.
For sure. One of the hardest things for anybody to admit to themselves is that they're struggling with mental anything.
Yeah.
You know, I think about, I have a grandma that suffers from Alzheimer's, and how she didn't really ever seem to address it within herself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we always think we're in control, no matter how bad it is to other people.
And I would like to think that anybody, you know, if you were an older man and started to notice,
I'm a little older than you,
but you started to notice your memory slipping,
Yeah.
and you're having trouble remembering your kids' names and stuff like that. The internal struggle in that is probably the most terrifying thing that
You can't do anything about it.
yeah, and it's, so it's just one of those deals.
Well, I'd love to get your opinion on, at least I want to touch this last thing for sure, is just not this church, but the church in general, and, mental health and depression and stuff like that. Sometimes we don't do the best job of addressing it, or just like you said, hey, let's pray over it or say a scripture, and, hopefully people will get better. And really, where do you see the church being able to help, or where they've missed the ball on that? Because there's so many people that struggle with that.
I think that one of the places that they miss the ball on it, that the church misses the ball on it a lot, is probably church leadership that deal with those things aren't as open as they should be with it. And so they seem like people that, you can't bring that issue to, or a lot of times whenever you do bring up an issue like that, they end up pawning you off to someone else because it's not something that they either deal with or that they can openly admit that they actively deal with. And I think that a lot more openness from the platform, and I'm not saying that everybody deals with depression, anything like that, but to have someone on staff that deals with that type of thing, be able to reach out to people that deal with that stuff to do a better job with that, and not just say you need to go to counseling. Here's, be anxious for nothing, pray about everything. Like, you can only say that stuff so many times before it's,
Just listen to me.
Yeah, it's exactly. It feels a lot like what what the non-denominational church condemns about other denominations like Catholicism. Like, sometimes whenever I'm given scripture stuff like that to read over myself, read this devotional once a day. If you're feeling bad, say this specific prayer. It's a rosary. It's 10 Hail Marys and a Our Father, and hope for the best. It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't do it.
So what's your advice, kind of closing up shop here? Like, what is your advice for somebody that's going through some of the stuff that you have to go through and mentally and emotionally? Like, what is just do these, get these kind of people around you, or, focus on this?
First, have people that care about you as a person. We were talking earlier about just simply asking somebody how they're doing, but be able to have people around you that you're willing to get to know you, to where they can say, hey, I'm not this isn't a pleasantry. I'm not asking you how you're doing as a greeting. I'm asking you how you are.
Yeah.
Having those type of people around that really do care, and that you can reach out to. And, I constantly read stories on Facebook and stuff all the time that, this person had a wife and a kid, and, the wife called him multiple times and suicide attempt stuff, and just one day she didn't catch him fast enough. It's hard to give an exact solution to something like that, just because everybody, mental illness, and which, by the way, the stigma, one of the first things that has to happen for people to get proper help is the stigma behind it has to start to go away. I don't know how to make that happen either, but it would be a lot better if Well,
I think a lot of it too is just conversations, like you said.
Yeah.
If people are in each other's lives without an agenda, just, I care for you as a person. I might not agree with what you do, what you say, with how to help or anything like that, but I just care about you as a person. And people do that and have conversations about it, then stuff starts, all that noise kind of goes away.
And another thing I would say is, don't be quick to move on to any type of medication without having a doctor that you really trust. We covered a mental health thing recently at church in conversations with Jim. you know, I didn't agree with some of the stuff, and you know, I told him it's not I don't know exactly what you think happens at these things, but this is, you know, the medical industry is also an industry. It's also a business. They also have to make money. I've probably been on 20, 25 different SSRIs, you know, depression meds in my life. And I've never gotten a call back from a doctor a week later saying, hey, how's it going? How you feeling? How you? Mm-hmm. No, like if I'm feeling bad, then I call them, come in, let's collect the money from your insurance. I'll write you another prescription. And if that doesn't work out,
try something else.
So I would say, I'm not saying not to get put on medication. I'm saying be slow, you know, to act on that kind of stuff.
Do research,
you know, especially whenever the side effects of a lot of this stuff is worse than the mental illness that you're struggling with. And then the other thing would be if you're a kid or if you're anybody that's on any type of addictive narcotics, anything like that. I'm also not a person that would tell anyone, you know, you got to quit doing everything. You can't ever do anything ever again. I think like marijuana, for instance, I think has a lot of benefits for different uses. I use CBD oil on a regular basis. You know, don't beat yourself up if you fall. Don't let that be something that pushes you further down. I see that happen with so many people. Pick yourself up. And also, if you're a kid, there are legitimate physical consequences to staying on that stuff for a long time. Yeah. You know, if you would have asked me even 5 years ago, whenever I moved here, that I would be feeling any type of physical repercussions from me doing, you know, heroin or Oxycontin or anything like that for so long, I would have told you no way. And, you know, here I am, you know, today, you know, there was a time where I was using lemon juice to dissolve crack and shooting it in my leg. I can't feel about 70% of my leg. It's numb. I've dislocated my knee a bunch of times. I can't walk fast without a knee brace. I cough really bad from smoking cigarettes for 11 years. Like all of that stuff, you know, you think that you're not going to become one of the statistics in that, but it's the only risk. The risk is not just you overdosing. It's that stuff affects you long term, you know, and I haven't touched it in almost 5 years now.
That's good advice, man. And, you know, I just want to say, I appreciate you being willing to come in front of the microphone and the camera, because this isn't something that you just sit down and share with everybody and tell them your full story of,
for sure.
Because most of what we talked about is just struggle, you know, it's like, we're not sitting here talking about all the amazing things that happened in your life. Like, we're really sharing about difficult stuff that you went through that hopefully will help other people by listening, because they're either going through it or they can help someone else that is going through it. So for that, I'm very appreciative that you were willing to do that, and people get to know you a little bit more and the person that's producing all of this and kind of the story about why, because you care.
Well, I appreciate you having me, man. Y'all are doing a great job with the podcast, and you know, we started doing the Be the Bridge thing yesterday.
Okay. At Racial Reconciliation Group.
Yeah, and I told the whole group, you know, kind of talking at Giovanna, sort of. We're just like, you know, I'm the only person that has seen every episode, including you, you know, because there's a few that Giovanna did herself.
The podcast,
and
that's true.
And you know, I told her the one thing after 10 episodes and having people from different races, different backgrounds, all that stuff say at the end of it is, you know, just open yourself up to the conversation. And that's what we're doing. And y'all are doing a great job at it. And I would say that, you know, to everybody that's dealing with addiction or mental illness or anything like that as well. It's not just, we're not just here to talk about racism or cultural whatever. Like, we're here to talk about our issues and how, you know, we've become neglected by other people's society and stuff like that in it. And you know, just be willing to have the conversation.
That's good words, my man. Well, how can people get a hold of you or follow you, or what's some of the stuff you're up to that we can put on the screen and put on social media? Yeah,
so we, Isaac and I have started our own podcast called Teddy Bears and Tentacles. So that's available on That's available on YouTube and I think Spotify right now and Anchor, and we're gonna get it sent, to Google Play and Apple and all that stuff here probably this week. But my Twitter handle, you can follow me on that, is at TBAT Quinn, so at TBAT Quinn. And if you want to follow Isaac as well, he is at TBAT Skinny Rick, SKINERICK. And so that's both the handles that we use for our podcast. So.
Fantastic. And you can catch me out at Schultz Time. I'll put that up on the screen, and you can always follow us on For the Neglected on Facebook, Instagram. I think we're on Twitter now too. And we always hashtag For the Neglected. So Quinn, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Isaac, thanks for producing while Quinn's over here being a guest, and catch everybody later. Thanks, man.
Yep.